Hi again, Bob Forche, Supply Chain Pro to Know, and we are back again. This is installment number 9 on the S&OP Maturity Assessment. And in this module, or I should say this segment, we're going to do process and demand, where we look at some key focus points in terms of planning and forecasting. So let's start with the concept that we need to have a month-long cycle, but it's going to also look at different time frames as we go through each cycle of a monthly review. What the outcome should look like is one number, an unconstrained consensus forecast, where we have ranges around that number. So not multiple different forecasts, but one forecast, one target number with ranges to manage risk around that. We have to look at the opportunities for demand shaping and consumer responses. And with AI and machine learning, there's some new things that we can do to really improve, especially in a retail environment. We can look at now risk opportunities where there might be some potential to take advantage of market share where competitors might not be willing to go there. So focusing on how we can grow revenue opportunities through looking at risk opportunities might be something that we can build into this process on a regular basis. Still a month-long cycle. We're always adopting different sources of information. We're thinking about trends. We're thinking about technology. We're thinking about economics. We're thinking about markets in general. We're thinking about geopolitical factors, the marketing analysis, doing pestle analysis, and Porter's 5 forces. All of these things are bringing us insights that we might want to revisit, in some cases monthly, in some cases quarterly, but always updating. So let's look at the different time frames that are involved with doing forecasting. So initially, we have to have a long-term view. What's necessary in terms of our vision and our mission, what business are we in, and what's that revenue plan look like for the next 2, 3, 5 years, maybe longer in some cases, considering where we might venture into new markets and global business opportunities. We need long-term visibility. So this is a long-term forecasting, which is really just revenue-based and strategy focus. The next level down is mid-range planning and forecasting, where we need to think about volumes and the size of our capacity. So that could be internal or external capacity. Do we need to think about expansion? Are there capital expenses we need to look at? Is there a different supplier partnership in the future? Maybe it's downsizing, maybe it's outsourcing. There could be some product changes in different kinds of equipment, different kinds of production capabilities. Then we get down into the more short range, and we're thinking about sales demand. Could also need to focus on non-revenue demand, test units, marketing requirements, things like that. And so this is more 30, 60, 90-day kind of time frame. This is where we want to focus more on the accuracy and think about known constraints that our supply side might be experiencing. Not too long ago, Apple had to make a really tough decision because here's their demand plan, but here's the supply of chips, and that problem wasn't going to get resolved quickly. So they had to actually reduce their demand plan by about $3 billion for the year a couple of years ago. Of course, this is also going to look at product lifecycle and new product development. Demand patterns, ramp-up rates, the adoption rate, end of life and product lifecycle planning certainly are going to be very important in this conversation too. Timing versus the competition versus capacity versus supply chain availability. And of course, the last piece is very short range planning. Now that we have AI and machine learning, we have new tools at our disposal which can look at a lot more data and understand what that data tells us, even unstructured data like social media. So this is something that's changing this process a little bit, because now we can have a different view of demographic factors, things that are changing in terms of demand influencing and short-term that really needs to be incorporated into the supply planning process on a monthly basis. One of the things that comes out of this conversation on a frequent basis is the topic of forecast accuracy. So I do want to spend a minute on that. Every forecasting process needs to constantly be monitoring how are we doing the forecasting, what is that doing to change the way our forecast accuracy is working, either improving or degrading, and why, what's changing and why. Until we understand the root cause of the variation, it's going to be hard to really do any meaningful improvements in the forecasting process. And we have to separate this. Random variation, we will never have any control on that. That's just inherent within the data. The market drives that, we don't drive that. But the other side is how we do the forecasting will have an effect on the forecast error. And definitely models can have a different fit a year ago from today. And so we look at historical data, we look at future, and what model we're testing on an ongoing basis could be changing in terms of how the demand patterns are changing over time. One of the things that's very important to understand here is that you're never going to have a perfect forecast. It's never going to be a schedule. It always will be a forecast with estimate, and it will always have forecast error, range of variation around it. And so something to think about is investing in alternatives which allow us not to depend as much on forecasting. And so that's just a thought in terms of, can we reduce our lead time, which allows us not to depend on forecasts as much. So the shorter we have a lead time, the less safety stock and less dependent we are on forecast. The expression to think of here is plan to the forecast but execute to the order. So the more we can become lean and shorter lead time, the less we are tied to that forecast. So that's our forecasting discussion and demand planning. So hope you got some value out of that today. And when we come back on the next segment, will be segment number 10, process, talking about supply. So thank you, and we'll talk again soon.